Shield up this sacred sword, we sneak through the counter, but they have back to back. Is Obstruct enough to survive? A double weakness to fighting? What is going on, everyone? Ox here with another video. If you're new to the channel, we do upload Pokemon Go content mostly related to PvP, and if you're a returning subscriber like Z Cherish, thank you for the support. In today's video, we are taking a look at some battles in the Open Ultra League featuring a team which helped me to climb over 300 elo and reach expert rank for season 15. The team being showcased will be led by a Shadow Dragonite running Superpower plus Dragon Claw and a backline consisting of Cresselia and Obstagoon, both of which are running unconventional movesets, with Future Sight instead of the legacy move Grass Knot and the legacy move Obstruct instead of Cross Chop. What I like about this backline is that it's hard to find a Pokemon that covers both Cresselia with Future Sight and Obstagoon. The biggest threat is probably Bug type, but in the Open Ultra League there isn't too many of those, so you should be okay. Obviously this team is going to be ABA Week 2 Fairy and Steel, which is going to cause a big problem. At least for the Steel, Dragonite does have Superpower, but against Fairy types, it's almost always going to be a top left. Let's jump into these battles. So before we jump into these battles, let's take a quick look at the top threats to this team. Obviously, ABA Week 2 both Fairy and Steel type Pokemon. I'd much rather prefer to see a Steel type lead than a Fairy, because Dragonite with Superpower at least has some play against the Steel types, whereas against a Fairy type, you're pretty much screwed. And speaking of screwed, Shadow Dragonite into Shadow Walrein, we are going to immediately swap out into Cresselia. The opponent's going to farm up some energy before swapping out into a Shadow Charizard, and this is where having Future Sight really does pay dividends. And notice here I am going for the Moonblast, not because it does more damage, it does significantly less, but this is a 5-head play to make the opponent think that we are not running Future Sight. Now because they actually chose to shield the first move, I'm going for a second Moonblast, but typically what happens is they let the first Moonblast go through, at which point they have no fear of a Future Sight, so the second time we go Future Sight and hit them with that bang. But since they chose to shield, we're going to throw a second Moonblast, setting up for the Future Sight on the third throw, and you already know, but the opponent doesn't. Bang! There it is. And that is how you flip switch with Future Sight Cresselia. Now in case you're wondering, one Future Sight from Cresselia does 65% of a Shadow Charizard's HP, so even if they were in the green, it was still going to KO. Opponent comes in with a Trevenant, we're going to land this Future Sight, and at this point, Obstagoon is basically going to sweep this matchup, especially with Obstruct, so I'm just throwing in the Dragonite to soak up the energy from Trevenant, at which point we will insta-swap into Obstagoon, shield up the first move because we are about to pump up that defense. Obstagoon reaching levels Harry Maguire could only dream of, and just like the Yankees' hopes of postseason baseball, this battle is over. Now in that particular matchup, the opponent was actually ABA Week 2 Obstagoon, so winning switch wasn't as important, but if they had something that actually beats Obstagoon in the back, winning switch advantage with Cresselia was definitely the win con. Next battle, we got Dragonite into Giratina running Shadow Claw. I'm going to look to try and catch a Dragon Claw onto Cresselia. Now Cresselia as a safe switch has some pros and cons. If you lure out a Pokemon like Charizard, it's pretty great, because most of the time we are going to win that matchup with Future Sight. But if you lure something out like Jellicent, for example, it's not the best scenario, because ideally you want to align Jellicent onto Obstagoon, and by luring it out with Cresselia, you're kind of defeating that purpose. Also just want to mention that we are getting a lot of attack drops with Moonblast, which is definitely a rare sight, and the opponent is going to catch this Moonblast onto Cobalion, which helps to explain why they were so hesitant to swap out. This team looks like it is quite weak to a Cresselia safe switch. Oftentimes Cresselia is going to get absolutely punished by Steel types on the safe switch, in particular Registeel or Stunfisk, but Cobalion is one of the few Steel types that Cresselia enjoys to see because of that part fighting type. Now I took a bit of a gamble here going for the Superpower right away, putting a lot of pressure on the opponent's second shield before they could throw a move at the Dragonite. Thankfully they let that go through. Our attack and defense has now been lowered. They come in with an Obstagoon, and since we're not running Cross Chop, we're kind of forced to stay in this matchup for the time being. Going to shield up this Night Slash and then swap out into my own Obstagoon. This is definitely a little bit risky of a play. My hope here is that we can Obstruct once and counter down before they reach 2 Cross Chops, since we are going to shield up the first. first, but the opponent swaps out into Giratina, most likely expecting to catch a cross chop, but instead they're going to get hit by that Obstruct. That's going to increase our defense even more, which is going to benefit us in that Obstagoon mirror. The play here is to build up to 2 Night Slashes, take out this Giratina, then throw the Night Slash at the opposing Obstagoon, and just hope that we could get it low enough to the point where Obstagoon takes it out on its own, or Dragonite comes in still with enough HP to withstand a Night Slash, and 1 or 2 Dragon Breaths should be enough to get the job done. Thankfully though, our Obstagoon is going to reign supreme, and we are off to a 2-0 start with this team. So jumping into battle number 3, we are leading Shadow Dragonite, this time into a Shadow Gliscor. Generally speaking, this is a positive matchup for Shadow Dragonite. Gliscor could win in the 0 shields, so even though we do survive a Night Slash, I am going to shield up the first one. There is the possibility of them getting the boost, but I think it's just the safest play if you want to maintain switch to shield up the first move. And then if you need to, you could always double shield. And basically right here, this kind of defeats the purpose of what I just said, because if they did get the boost, this Night Slash would have KO'd and they would have ended up winning in the 1s. But I feel like if you don't shield the first one, they're more inclined to play for switch, so that's kind of what I was getting at there. But either way, they let that go through. We take switch, opponent comes in with a Cresselia. Given how low our Dragonite was, I think giving up alignment would have been a bad play, because we don't have a great answer for the opponent's Cresselia aside from our own, so we're basically forced to do as much Dragon Breath damage as we possibly can, come in with Cresselia, and look to see what the opponent's next move is going to be. Now since it looks like the opponent is going to play this matchup out, it's going to take quite some time, and you definitely have to give some consideration to a timeout strategy when this happens. There will be a few matches with mirror matches that take this long where the opponent could win simply by having an extra Pokemon with a sliver of HP remaining, even if you had the hard counter answer in the back lining up to win. And as you're about to see, that is exactly what the opponent tries to do, catching this Moonblast onto their Jellicent, preserving that Cresselia with a sliver of HP, but unfortunately for the opponent, we have Obstructagoon in the back, and as you could see from that PvPoke chart, there is absolutely no win con for the opponent. That matchup right there is not obstruction, it is complete destruction. So 3-0 heading into this next matchup, 1 win away from clinching the expert rank. We got Shadow Dragonites into Regirock, not a good lead, going to swap out into Cresselia, and here comes the hard counter, Jellicent. Now if we had Grass Knot, this matchup is a little bit better, still not a great matchup for Cresselia, but definitely more playable than running Future Sight plus Moonblast. Now obviously it's impossible to flip this matchup, but I started thinking what is the best play here, and I decided that since we're going to get some farm on the Jellicent, the less shields in play, the more likely we have a chance of winning against that Regirock. Because Dragonite, if we can reach 2 superpowers, should be able to take out the Regirock, at least I thought. So I decided to burn a shield right here in exchange for one of the opponents. And since the Jellicent does have some energy, I'm going to come in with the Obstagoon to soak that up. And once they're completely dry, counter isn't doing anything to Jellicent, I'm going to swap out into the Dragonite and then hope I could get a big enough energy lead to do some damage to the Regirock and outpace the 2 superpowers before it reaches 2 Stone Edges. Now with all that said, of course they could simply have a Fairy type in the back and we just lose automatically. But let's hope for the best, swap out into Dragonite, farm up some energy on that Jellicent, Regirock comes back in, and that thing is so spammy. I thought I would outpace it to a superpower. They get to that Stone Edge so quick, we're forced to burn a shield, and now I realize there's no chance we reach 2 superpowers, so I'm just going for that Hail Mary play and pray they think it's a bait. Hit them with that weight. Literally 1 Dragon Breath short of taking this Regirock out. If I had simply thrown 1 more Dragon Breath before that superpower, we could have potentially taken out this Regirock, and considering what they have left in the back, there is a high likelihood that we would have won this battle and clinched expert rank. But sometimes you play bad like Manchester United and you get lucky enough to steal a win against Wolves. Other times, you play bad like Manchester United and you get the loss you deserve, just like me. Forget about Legend rank, we're out here getting gatekept for expert rank. So one more opportunity to get the job done. Shadow Dragonite into an Alolan Muck. I would consider this to be a neutral matchup for Dragonite, but unfortunately I do make a mistake here. Shielding up the first move when it's clearly an Acid Spray, the opponent didn't even build up to enough energy for a Dark Pulse, so that's just a bad shield on my part. We are going to be able to reach 2 Dragon Claws though, and now that the opponent has shown that they are running Acid Spray, it eliminates any chance of them having Sludge Wave unless they're a complete lunatic running an all poison moveset. So it's pretty safe to come in here with the Obstagoon, because even though they are loaded on energy, it poses no threat to Obstagoon, so the opponent's going to throw an Acid Spray, swap out into Virizion, and we come in with the Cresselia. Now Cresselia already dominates this matchup with just Moonblast. It's going to perform even better with Future Sight, and on top of that we do have a 1 shield advantage. So at this stage in the battle, Cresselia is in such a dominant position, we don't want to invest our shield right here. Want to preserve it for the Obstagoon in the end game. Cresselia could definitely tank a bunch of Leaf Blades. We're going to throw the Future Sight. That's not going to be enough to take out the Virizion. However, it is going to leave its HP in the very deep red, which is going to set up a perfect scenario to Cycle Cut all the way down. Now instead of swapping out into Obstagoon, potentially giving the opponents a win con, if they have something that hard counters it, we're going to stay in with Cresselia. The opponent comes in with Muck. Obviously we cannot Cycle Cut down, so we're going to throw the Moonblast, and the opponent has a Cobalion in the back. Now this of course would have been very bad news for our Obstagoon even with a 1 shield advantage, because we are not running Cross Chop, and right here if we correctly shield a Stone Edge, we should be able to reach the Future Sight, but I decide to take a gamble. Stone Edge takes us out, and now it's all on Obstagoon with a shield, full HP and Obstruct against a Cobalion at about 50% of its HP. If we had Cross Chop, we would have already won. Shield up this Sacred Sword, we sneak through the counter, but they have back-to-back. Is Obstruct enough to survive? A double weakness to fighting? Yes it is. Barely hanging on to get off this Night Slash despite being resisted. Hit him with that. Bang! There it is. Obstructagoon, a Cobalion counter confirmed. Now I wouldn't say this is an easy team to run. In fact, my initial plan was to run Gliscor in the lead instead of Dragonite. Unfortunately, I did not have one built. Gliscor of course would perform better against Fairy and Steel types in the lead, providing you with more play, but Shadow Dragonite did alright. Next up in the GBL schedule is Master League plus the Ultra Fantasy Cup. Time for Niantic to wake up, basically telling every new player, F you, we don't want you to play GBL anyways. Thanks for watching.